opportunity, and it should be promoted to the consumers directly. Other, influencers that we must find, like dietitians, and there are some, the health groups, nowadays.
The supportive. So what you're saying about then what Anirudh and Rahul were endorsing, that they are not into the pharma's typical lens, these other things. So without this, they will not be able to do justice. So is that the barrier?
You need to look at wider opportunities.
Okay. Samir, you have you've been experience of being in pharma, wellness, and you've had a multi-regional perspective. What's your perspective on this comment?
Yeah, I think a lot of the speakers have captured the gist of this, and I think the fundamental issue is, especially when I moved in from FMCG and OTC into pharma, the big difference you've got to have is the looking at it from the lens of the patient, right? And that still doesn't exist. And I think the second issue is that structurally, there was such a major advantage that all pharma companies had, where they had consumer and pharma under the same umbrella, and all of them have split it out. And you need very, very different marketing expertise when you're doing nutraceutical marketing, because definitely you need the HCP endorsement, but a lot of it still will going through patient support groups, through direct to patient consumer communication, and you don't have the expertise, right? And pharma has been notoriously risk averse from a digital engagement perspective, and a lot of it is internal in terms of compliance and regulatory saying you can't engage, which is not. See a lot of companies now making progress there, but you need to get in consumer and patient. You have to ensure that this happens together with the right thing and the right capabilities.
Right. That's interesting, Samir. And I think what you raised about digital as being one of the barriers, maybe this last 3 months, we have seen a lot of pharma companies moving to these platforms of engaging various stakeholders. So maybe, COVID would act as a reset button. But if we go back to the previous thing, so thanks for sharing all your views. If we go to the fundamental operations wise, my question to Vijay comes from also hardcore operations, pharma, and he has built successful brands in nutraceuticals. So I will ask this question to Vijay. Vijay, what according to you are the key barriers that when a pharma takes over a nutraceutical brand, what do you feel are the key barriers in pharma promoting nutraceuticals?
Thanks, Vikram.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vikram. At least this question is not as provocative as your first question was.
You want to address that? You can actually.
And I think that's been beautifully captured by Anirudh and Rahul and others. So coming to this question, the key barriers to pharma promoting nutraceuticals. I mean, I strongly believe, being a hardcore marketeer, we need to convert those barriers into stepping stone into success. So coming to the barriers, there are 4 to 5 barriers according to me. I will explain one by one. The first one, the dilemma or the barrier, is the route. Whether you want to take the drug route or you want to take the food product route. That is the first dilemma. Both has its own advantages as well as disadvantages. If it is a drug, then you can put your claims, indications, dosage, etc. However, the pricing will be monitored by NPPA. And the availability becomes easier because it will be made available in drugstore, both offline and online. Now, if it is going to be a food product route, then you cannot put claims, indications as per the regulatory norms. And the advantage that you have is there is no capping in terms of price increase. And this can be made available apart from your conventional channels. You can make these products available in modern trade also. For example, Yakult is available in the next door provisional shops also. So depending upon your strength, what is your strength area? Whether it is drug or the food route, you need to take a decision. Number one. Number two, if it is going to be a drug route, because I'm just trying to reinforce what Anirudh said is the dilemma between treatment versus prevention. Unfortunately, our country in India, we are more skewed towards the treatment option than the prevention option. Whereas if you look into West, US, there the skew is more towards the prevention. And we also have heard and read that with the disposable income going up, the feel good factor, the look good factor, products would go up. And the nutraceutical is all about the feel good, and the cosmeceutical is all about the look good factor. The second barrier which I see is the evidence. Okay. Now, having taken the decision that I'm going to take the drug route, the evidence becomes my barrier. What happens is, more often than not, today the nutraceutical products, the manufacturers, the manufacturers especially, they come to us with minimum or minimal claims. Okay, I mean, when you go to the doctor with claims, doctors, I presume that we are in the evidence-based selling. And doctors, they don't appreciate the claims. The doctors, they want facts. And doctors, they want recommendation. And that's where the problem starts. And that's the reason why today, most of the companies, they're not able to build on these nutraceuticals because the evidence level is very, very weak. I mean, even, for example, if I'm going to recruit a driver for my car, I will not recruit him based on his claim that he can drive my car properly. I would like to see the fact, whether he's got a proper driving license. The third important point is the quality. I mean, what do I mean by quality is because nutraceutical products, for example, if you take probiotics, it requires a different kind of a transportation and storage facility. I mean, now, Indian pharmaceutical market has come of the age. Today, we have the best of the infrastructure to take care of this. For example, if you take probiotic, if the pack says 10 billion colony forming units, at the end of the shelf life period, it has to be 10 billion colony forming units. So today, how many manufacturers can give that kind of a reliable quality? So that becomes a barrier. Last but not the least, pricing becomes a barrier because nutraceuticals is a co-prescriptive therapy. It is not a main therapy.
Supportive therapy.
Yes, co-prescriptive therapy. So the doctor always looks into what is the cost of the co-prescriptive therapy because that should not become a burden on the patient's prescription. So these are the things: route, evidence, quality, and pricing are the four major barriers which I feel the pharma is facing today when it comes to nutraceuticals.
Thanks, Vijay. I think that was very well articulated, and I think the example which you gave regarding the distinction between claims and recommendations and evidence, I think that's a very, very important part. And I recall that once you had also mentioned that this is a journey which has to be a continuous kind of journey, right? But I would like to build on this. You raised a very important point in the beginning that wellness per se is not having, unlike the markets in the West, where if I say evolved towards wellness, right? So we are not seeing that in India. Santosh, since your business deals more with the Indian customers directly, you're in more touch with Indian consumers. What would you say about this thing? Are we now moving towards wellness as the Indian consumer moving towards wellness now, or is still a lot of headwind against that? Question for Santosh.
Santosh, you're on mute here.
Yeah, hi. I think so in bits and pieces, I think the answer has already been given by Samir, Vijay, Christopher, and everyone, but let me just try to take a shot at it. Clearly, the nutraceutical industry is directionally headed in the right direction in terms of, we see every year, if you see the consumers who are willing to accept health products or which are there for in fact more towards prevention or better health, that you see the graph is on upward swing, right? So at that extent, yes. So there are a couple of macro trends that we see, and probably I think we can all feel it around. One, obviously, because of the digital world, the kind of awareness level. Initially, if you see the gatekeepers of health products, as rightly it was pointed out, it was mostly through a doctor, right? Doctor recommend a product. But with lots and lots of content around digital medium and the rise of the influencer as a category themselves, yes, we do see as another opportunity or the leg of information dissemination where you trust. Ultimately, it's all about trust. Which information do you trust? And earlier it was only a doctor. Now you have influencers, be it in the form of social media influencers, nutritionists, and things like that. So that's one trend that we see, that consumers are getting more and more aware day by day with the rise of internet connectivity around country. People are becoming more and more health aware. So the number of people who are going for a walk in the morning, and if you see even the younger generation people coming out quite in a lot, and those are some basic trend that we the concept of or the fear of side effects from the pharma products is also does plays quite a lot in India per se. So I think there are these 4 or 5 trends I would specifically like to touch upon the natural piece here, because the natural origin of nutraceutical is something that has a very strong headwind, and that's where I think people would like to accept these products. For example, there is a ingredient called apple cider vinegar at the end of the day. While all of us were trying to promote as much probiotics, as Vijay was saying, I think it's sort of, there is a company which came up with apple cider vinegar. There was a consumer trend. Someone picked up on that consumer trend and they made a category out of it. And it's been over the last 3 years. You see that. So I'm saying the consumer is getting aware. It's just that there are certain macro level trends which are driving this category. What was earlier, which probably the way Nutra worked in the West might not work in India, because India typically has its own consumer insights, and someone will have to understand that consumer insight, that nutraceutical market needs to be adapted for India to that extent, and whoever is able to do that will have a strong head.
Okay, thanks. Also, that's an interesting thought when we're talking about wellness. And one thing which comes to my mind is, I don't know whether this is the right analogy or not, but if we look at derma, and Vijay is an expert in derma sitting right there. So cosmeceuticals, and don't worry, Vijay, this question is not going to come to you because of something, right? Just a thought that here you have seen an upsurge of cosmeceuticals in India, right? Pharma companies invest into cosmeceuticals. Every company which is worth its salt is having now a derma and cosmetic derma division, and it's one of the fastest growing divisions. I see the same issues over there in terms of, if I can maybe say that cosmeceuticals is wellness for the skin, right? And nutraceutical is general wellness. And yet we see cosmeceuticals as a booming lucrative segment, dedicated task forces and teams behind it, right? And we don't see that coming in nutraceuticals as yet, right? So what do you feel about this? I would ask, that the reason why we have limited success stories in pharma for nutraceuticals, and I would like if Mr. Rambabu can give his opinion on this, right? Where we have now a lot more success stories in cosmeceuticals, but we are not having that kind of success stories in nutraceuticals. I will ask the same question to Ram and maybe to Anirudh also for his views.
Mr. Vikram, I think the people are looking good, then actually being good, So I think they want to look good to the world. However, they feel miserable inside. So they can live with their problems in the body, but they can't how they look at. So that is where people are more spending money, and there are few doctors who are actually driving this. These are all again endorsed products. They are not being bought over the counter. These cosmeceuticals.
Correct.
Not just typical OTC cosmetics.
Absolutely, they're endorsed.
Premium products which are have science also, and then there are some doctors who strongly believe in it, and then these doctors are endorsing. And there is some section of people in the society who are willing to pay for these, the premium products. So that's how I think it has captured well trend. But again, not going into the masses. These are only in urban areas and some section of population who is going for these products. But yes, the market is created well. But compared to this, nutraceuticals have much bigger opportunity. Every person, even in a village, can take a nutraceutical product if it is properly priced and if it is properly positioned. Like today, Ginkgovit is one product which is available across the country, every corner. So there can be more such products even in nutraceuticals.
Right. That's very interesting. I think there's a huge, very important point which you made there. That are we as a consumer more in how we look than more than how we feel inside, right? I think that was a very interesting thought. Anirudh, what are your views on this? Why would uh, one point which Rambabu is talking about is nutraceuticals is perceived as mass segmentation and mass markets and all that, whereas cosmeceuticals is elite, right? Uh, Cosmeceuticals are also very highly priced; they're not cheap, as Vijay would also endorse, right? Then why are we having so limited case, success stories in nutraceuticals? What is your opinion on this? Question for Anirudh.
Yeah. So I would pick up a few points from the answers which couple of speakers gave earlier as well. That I think cosmeceutical is one success story which has fitted the pharma model. It is still doctor based, it is still prescription based, it is still uh, evidence based, as Mr. Rambabu was saying. This is still very niche. If you look at the people opting for this, although the segment is attractive, and the segment has become attractive based on what Santosh has said, the consumer trend is already there. It's just catching the trend and building on it, which in a small pharma world, all of us have seen that we do it very fast. One success, and then there are 20 copies of that success very quickly.
Right.
So I think this is a good sign. I would say this is a good sign. If cosmeceuticals can happen, nutraceuticals will also happen.
Right.
Possibly needs to unlock is the way we look at our stakeholders. Okay. So doctor-centric stakeholder behavior will give you a certain level of success, but as a patient-centric or a influencer-centric,
right.
emerge, I think you will get much more options to build the nutraceuticals, and I'm sure there are attempts on that count. It is not that it is not happening. One big success story, and the model will be sealed in this country and will be very quickly attempted by many other players. Yes.
Right. Thanks, Anil.
I just had Vikram.
Yeah, I was coming to you only, Samir, on this.
Yeah.
Because we're talking India. Can you share with us, something which is some global success stories where you've seen this thing which is happening, nutraceuticals being adopted by pharma and becoming a success.
So actually, I'll come on to that, but just before that, the comparisons between dermocosmetics or cosmeceuticals, and I think the fundamental difference is that in the dermocosmetic space, your stakeholder from an HCP perspective is a dermatologist only. Whereas in the nutraceutical space, you've got products towards cancer patients, toward diabetic patients, to different patients, and hence you need to go into different therapy areas. So from a scale point of view, it's an issue that you just can't go into one TA. So you'll have to find one pharma company which is strong in cardio, one in terms of diabetology and stuff. So you've got to go to different stakeholders, whereas dermocosmetics is very clear. And obviously the margins, the e-commerce capabilities in dermocosmetics have been much higher. Also, I think the issue is coming back to my earlier point around the entire consumer-focused marketing. I'm in fact consulting with a couple of companies right now, which are pharma generic companies, but they've got nutraceutical products in their portfolio, say for heart health, like chia seeds. The problem they're facing is that even after doctors recommend the product, the repeat purchases are not coming in because patients are seeing, is it really worth the money? I can't see the benefit immediately. And if I can't see the benefit immediately, should I just keep buying such expensive products? And actually a webinar that was conducted by Nutrify India, I think last week, on how do you get patients to change behavior and induce loyalty into this space is a really critical part, which requires really consumer focused communication and marketing and habit change. So that's from a point of view of this space. Now looking at international, actually, Vikram, I've really struggled in terms of trying to find this because you've got pharma companies that have got a consumer business and hence have built up something. So say a Centrum coming in from Pfizer, as in that works, but it's not really the pharma company doing it. It's the consumer arm of the pharma company that's doing it. When I was at Mandi Pharma, we actually partnered with HealthSyn, which does a lot of cancer supportive care. We'd got a product for them called Pommy, which was actually for prostate cancer with fantastic clinical trials behind it, a pure natural ingredient. But we had a cancer supportive care portfolio. And because I had the luxury of a pharma and a consumer portfolio under one roof, I could have the same medical rep going and promoting our oncology range and promoting the cancer supportive care range.
Right.
It would actually make it work. But it's a rarity. It's very difficult to find companies these days which have consumer and OTC portfolios under the same umbrella, and hence the capabilities to do it. So Abbott obviously has fantastically done it by having a separate vertical under nutrition. But again, it's just separate verticals. And I think that's a fundamental systemic issue and structural issue that will need to be addressed. And without that, I think all the nutraceutical players will have to rely on finding different partners for different TAs to make it a success.
Right. I just to pick up on that point, and Samir, I want you to just, if you can go a bit deeper into that. When you're talking about your experience with this onco core therapy and supportive therapy, as you say, right? Through the same frontliner, the sales guy. How did he balance this? At one stage, he's talking about survival rates or remission or something. How would he be managing the supportive and bringing to the same specialty in that? Was there a difficulty in this?
It is difficult, but the critical thing is we had clinical data behind it, and we had a KOL. So we literally got in a global KOL to come in and speak about that. But having said that, oncologists are notoriously difficult to talk about anything that is not treatment oriented, right? They're only worried about treatment and they just ignore everything else. So you still have to get into patient communication, supportive care. Actually, nurses and caregivers actually are your biggest target audience for something like this, because the oncologist really doesn't care and doesn't want to listen.
That's exactly what I wanted to, how did you guys manage it?
So it's supportive care people.
Interesting. Very nice. Very nice. Right. So now I think, Anirudh, if I come to you for this question, you've been at a leadership position, and in your thing, you've seen that a lot of companies coming and pitching for products, right? A lot of our audience would also be from the nutraceutical manufacturers, inventors, or something. What homework or what kind of checklist would you be looking at when evaluating a nutraceutical product for pharma business?
Well, if the answer is very crystal clear, it's a $1 billion question, which I think would be getting answered. But let me attempt. See, as I said, it is a product business. Pharma companies and pharma people are tuned to evaluate the merit of the product against a claim. Now, when we see the same lens for nutraceutical products, whichever gets pitched, the first issue is clarity of the claim. We understand, and most of us understand, that a nutraceutical is having multiple roles in various biochemical pathways in the body. And it is quite possible that it works in more than 6 or 7 conditions and works great. But for commercial reasons and for evidence reasons, it is very difficult to really convince all the 6 and 7 specialties on the strength of the data and the merit of the product. I think Samir briefly touched in terms of stakeholders and being focused on certain kind of doctors and not trying to attempt to achieve too many things in too many conditions. So the first thing which any Nutra company is attempting to have a dialogue with the pharma company at whatever level is to first have the clarity on merit of the product, and that merit should be specific. I have a product which solves all the ills. I think that's the first sign of not having the movement forward in any discussion, because there is nothing which can solve all the ills. Second possibly area is understanding the depth of clinical evidence. Typically, nutraceuticals come up and say that I have these 20 clinical trials published in these 20 journals or whatever, European, US, so on and so forth. Yes, the ingredients are studied, the ingredients are researched, the ingredients are published. But is the source credibility established? Is the source credibility is equal to ingredient credibility? The formulation which gets formulated out of this ingredient is the same efficacy as the published efficacy. So these measurements and the possibility to deviate this line is very thin in pharma domain. So one has to be very clear, very objective, and very, I would say, very focused in its approach whenever there is a discussion with pharma people on opportunity of Nutra. And then every segment, in my opinion, trying to make a big product out of every ingredient will has to start somewhere. So you have to choose the indication, the claim, and the possibility of patient alleviation symptom, and then build the product around this. That choice is largely a commercial and technical decision given the journey of the ingredient. But to start with, I would repeat, it is important not to have too many claims. It is important to understand the strength of the clinical data, and it is important to understand that what am I talking is just an ingredient or a formulation or a concoction, whichever way it is.
That sourcing part also, which you told. So strength of claims and the sourcing would be critical. So this is, if you can say that this is like, the screening process, before a long-term partnership can commence. And Rahul, you have seen various kind of partnerships with inventors and pharma companies. What, according to you, makes a long-term partnership, take? Or what are the key elements what you would see which would be vital for a successful partnership between a nutraceutical supplier and a pharma company? Question for Rahul.
Yeah, so I think building up a good partnership between a classical nutraceutical company or nutrition company and a classical pharma company is a very difficult job. And a lot of us who are in pharma would have, kind of came across with a lot of companies coming to them and say, I have a great product, it does all the things. On the other hand, then we have also in this, audience would be a lot of companies who are in the mainstream nutrition or nutraceutical area, and they would say pharma guys don't understand. So somewhere what my observation, and when I've seen both sides of the story, and my observation is, on one side, pharma is excessively focusing on the evidence side, and on the other side, I have come across folks which are very excessively focusing on the ingredient side. In their mind, their ingredient is their product.
Right.
And other side, pharma is evidence is everything. And hence, I think marrying these two is a very, very difficult task, right? And somewhere that's where when you're kind of finding out a kind of a common alliance. My view is, there are certain elements which are kind of have to come together from both of these, and a common point and convergence point in my mind is the finally patient. And of course, if you're taking patient as a view and as a channel for nutraceutical, because as we know, nutraceutical can go even for prophylaxis and for healthy people and all of that. But if you took really the pharma way of looking at it, the unit is patient. And when both of them are actually converging on patients, and that's why they need to talk the common language, and they need to at least tune to each other on that common platform. And the most important piece, I would say that finally, what are we trying to solve? From an ingredient side, what are we trying to solve? We're finally trying to solve some of the patient needs. From an evidence side and from a pharma side, what are we trying to solve? We are again trying to solve the kind of patient problems. So I think articulating your patient needs and observing your patient needs are extremely important in kind of designing even a good nutraceutical product. You can't come and say, I have XYZ nutraceutical, so take my product. So that's often is the kind of a challenge when we are dealing with a lot of nutraceutical companies. And hence, I think it is very important for even, I would say it's almost like a co-development route, because the three elements in my mind which are very critical for developing a good nutraceutical product which would fit in pharma is there are three core elements. One is, of course, what is the patient need we are trying to solve.
Right.
I mean, classical example in diabetes, a lot of us are, we have seen a lot of products in diabetes, right? And when we look at from a pharma guy's point of view, there are at least 6 to 7 different mechanisms of actions and entire concoction of, if you see the prescription, there will be all the possible mechanisms of action in pharma domain are written in that prescription. And what is left? Now, when that is the situation, when your all the basic needs are being already served from your, kind of all the medicines, you can't have a nutrition and again go and claim that I have HbA1c reduction, and that's where is the problem. Rather than solving the need of HbA1c reduction, I think that need is already solved. I won't call it as an unmet need right now. The need for a diabetes patient is also, doctor talk a lot about the lifestyle changes, the food habit changes. In a classical way, doctor will always say, eat less but at a higher frequency.
Right.
You can always solve for eating less, but how will you solve for higher frequency? The kitchen is closed kitchen is open only in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Only 3 times the kitchen is open, right? And you go anywhere. I mean, that's a typical pattern. In such situation, how do you ensure that a diabetic patient will eat healthy even at a higher frequency, say at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock? How do you solve that problem?
Right.
That is a fundamental need gap, I would say. Once you identify that as a need gap, then as a nutrition company, you play in nutrition space and be a good nutrition rather than a bad medicine.
Okay.
And that's where, all of this nutrition will end up as a bad medicine, because the pharma companies will ask them for evidence. Lack of evidence is a bad product. That's a classical way of looking at this thing. Rather than being a bad medicine, you be a good nutrition and try to solve these problems. I think these are the basic design, issues. If they solve, that is where there will be a marriage happening. So you can work on good ingredients which will solve that need. In this case, in diabetes case, you can find out the ingredients which will solve for your low GI kind of. Doctors don't want HbA1c further reduction. Doctor want a kind of a nutrition which will have control on your GI, the surge of GI, or your appetite, all of those things doctors want to control, which they are not able to control from a classical medicine's point of view. And that is where, in my mind, is a kind of coexistence or a possibility of coexistence. And once you identify, once the needs are there, I would say the nutraceutical guys are experts in ingredient. If you ask them a disease condition, they will tell you 10 ingredients, how these ingredients have a literature evidence, how that disease is being treated by that ingredient. But really, they have not, married it to the kind of a need. And the last thing is, I would say, the formats. Often we have very, very, very simple way. I mean, I would say, even nutrition in often I have seen is just a tin format and powder in it, and that's our definition of, or on the other side, a capsule or a tablet. We've seen a very less or little innovation in even formats. So if we marry these 3 things, the convenient format, which is fitting to the patient's need, the need of the patient, and the ingredients we have, if we just marry this and create a good value proposition, which is backed with some level of evidence, which is again not a kind of grade way evidence which is going on a medicine side, but even in a nutrition, which I said, be a good nutrition with some evidence which would help you being that domain. There is a thin line which, if you try to cross, then your burden of evidence substantially goes up. Don't cross that, but be in that space and be the best good nutrition, which would help to address the patient need. And that's what pharma companies actually can take to the doctors and talk about it, and they would also love to do that.
Right. I think that Rahul, you made a very, very important point over here, that don't try to be a good medicine, right? Because then you need to build up a lot of evidence. Rather focus on being a good nutrition supplement. And I think a very important take which you mentioned over here is which I'm taking back. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That if I'm a nutrition manufacturer, right, rather than going by the ingredients, can I actually take some insights on the therapy or the patient insight and then design my product accordingly, which fills an unmet need? Is that what?
Yeah.
Is that what?
Absolutely.
Okay. Vijay, you have under you have built some nutritional brands, right? So we've now had elements of what it takes to take kind of screening which a nutritional product or company should have, like a checklist, what it should do, what it should not do. Now suppose the product has now come in, right, and it's been given to a pharma. So what is the advice you would give, because we have pharma marketers also in the audience, right? What advice would you give pharma marketers for building a successful nutraceutical portfolio? If you could share from your experience. Vijay.
Okay. Yeah, Vikram. So having spent more than 2 decades in this industry, I mean, I would say I was lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time. I mean, why do I say so? Because I started my career with a company called American Remedies. I mean, people who follow the industry, they would know what is this company is all about. And I can say with a lot of pride, this is the company which established the concept of zinc in India. This is a company which established the concept of antioxidants in India. I'm talking about the early the 90s.
Yes.
That's the time, I mean, this company, I was associated with this company. And then I moved to Pfizer. There again, my association with nutraceuticals continued in the form of Bicozules and Protein-X. And then I had spent 9 years in Dr. Reddy's, where my association was with a brand called Econom, which is a probiotic. And this was being promoted by the division which I was heading there. So now coming to the pharma marketeers, I mean, what are the things that they should evaluate to build a successful nutraceutical portfolio? I would first say, the first question that you should ask yourself is, are you here to sell a brand or are you here to build a brand? Because there is an ocean of a difference between selling and building. Selling is short-term, myopic. Building is long-term. And remember, Rome is not built overnight. Number 2 question is, you should ask yourself is, how am I capable to identify the blue ocean, the road that is less traveled? Okay, I mean, no doubt it's not going to be bed of roses. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of persistence, a lot of tenacity for you to build and travel with the brand over a period of time. And always focus on creating the market rather than taking a share from the existing market. Today, you walk into most of the PMT cabins, the first question that is asked is, how big is the market? When the discussion starts about the new product identification, how big is the market? Right. So what is happening is the first step itself, we are putting the blinkers. We are looking at the existing market and trying to take a market share. I mean, that's not the role of a marketeer. The role of a marketeer is to create the market. And the next important element is, I mean, since the question is about pharma marketeers, I presume that they are going to take the drug route because the customer to which they are going to promote are doctors. So the scientific rationale should be pretty strong. Even if it is not very strong, the claim should be decent enough to take it to the doctors in the first go. And the next important point is you need to choose your partner. It could be your the in-licensing partner. Suppose if you're getting it from outside, in case of the case study of Econom, Biocodex France was our in-licensing partner. I mean, I'm sure Rahul as well as Anirudh would agree with me. I mean, selection of this partner is very, very important. And as a marketeer, you should start liaising with the medical associations for endorsement. And today, I'm happy to see it is a 100 crore brand. This was not built overnight. It had taken a lot of time. And if I have to share my experience of dealing with this brand, apart from passionate people, support comes from the organization. When we first took Econom to the pediatricians, by the way, Econom is a brand name. The molecule is Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a probiotic. When we first took to the pediatricians, they brushed aside, telling that probiotics is not required in India because curd is an integral part of our diet.
I remember, yes.
Okay, so that was the comment of the pediatricians at that point in time. From there, we started our work, our partnership with Biocodex started in strengthening the claims so that the claims becomes facts and facts becomes recommendation. So what we did is we partnered with one Professor Yuvan Vandanplas, who is considered to be the father of probiotics. He's from Belgium. So we brought into India 3 times in 3 different years, and we used to conduct CMEs, calling pediatricians to every location and disseminate pure science, because he is going to talk about his experience of this particular strain of probiotic worldwide. Next, the doctors from claims, they started moving to facts. Then they started asking, okay, fine, good. Espagyan is recommending, North American Association is recommending, but what about Indian clinical trials? Simultaneously, we started working and we started doing a multi-center clinical trial in India in 3 centers, PGH Chandigarh, KEM Hospital Pune, and STAT Hospital Trivandrum, and we generated the Indian clinical data. From claims, we moved to the facts. Over a period of time, what happened is the recommendation of probiotics, especially for Saccharomyces boulardii, started coming in the Nelson's textbook of pediatrics, which is the Bible for pediatricians. In the meantime, what we did is, my team and Dr. Reddy's, we worked very closely with the Indian Academy of Pediatricians, and we came up with a consensus treatment guidelines for the treatment of diarrhea, where probiotic was also a part of it, apart from your ORS and zinc.
Wonderful.
So
Wonderful.
if I have to sum it up, for any, not only for nutraceutical portfolio, for any portfolio for a marketer to build, he or she should have an evergreening strategy in place and work with various stakeholders, generate enough science, generate enough third-party support so that your brand credibility goes up significantly. And remember here, if you are the market leader, it is your responsibility to expand the market.
Right.
Today, if probiotic market is valued close to 1,000 crores, okay, where a brand like Econom has played a very, very vital role.
Right. Thank you, Vijay. I think what you mentioned, I think the key take home was that the difference between selling and creating, that was one. So what you mentioned in the last 5 minutes is actually many years journey, and it's been done with a systematic progress. And the third, I think, which was coming out, that even your nutritional partner was a very key stakeholder in moving from claim, fact, and recommendation in this journey, right? I think that's what you had mentioned. It was not about, here's my product, take it, मैंने product बेच दिया, अब आप, you take it forward, right?
That's where I mentioned my first point was whether your intent is to sell a product
Correct.
or to build a product.
I think that's a very, very valid insight for both the supplier and also the person who's handling the brand. I think that it's been pretty interesting. We have had mixed thing that yes, pharma, it's not that pharma cannot do justice, pharma can do justice. And there have been cases where it's been done justice to the portfolio. We are also seeing what Santosh had mentioned, that there is an evolution in terms of the Indian consumer becoming more and more aware. Maybe COVID will give this kind of a boost where awareness about wellness as such. Samir had given a very interesting global perspective of certain trends, and I particularly will keep that example which Samir, you had mentioned, that in a very high involvement therapy like cancer, and the same guy promoting core therapy and a co-therapy, how you manage both. Mr. Ram Babu was also mentioned about, that what the key reasons why pharma, he said that pharma can't, hold pharma back about promoting a nutraceutical portfolio, right? But it can be done. I think even what is coming out is the strength of data, which is important. And what the key thing, what I take away, which was mentioned by Rahul, was that be a good nutraceutical. You don't have to be a very good medicine. Play in your space, and I think take learnings from there. Because the more you try to venture into somebody else's strength, you'll have to build up a strength of ton of evidence, which may not stand. You're hitting too many barriers and paradigms to actually tackle that, right? And if you can design a product rather than becoming ingredient focused, design a product on basically what are the unmet needs for a particular patient group, right? So I think that's pretty interesting. And when this had been, when we were publicizing that this webinar would be held, there were certain questions which came on mail, right? And there were some very specific questions. And one of the questions which came was that how many pharmaceutical companies venture into nutraceuticals as a division, right? And what is the success rate as a separate division, not as a part of the main pharma thing? So I would maybe, Mr. Rambabu, if you can throw some light on this, that how many top of the mind pharmaceutical companies ventured into nutraceuticals as a division, putting people exclusively behind, and what was the success rate?
Yeah, I remember there are not many such examples. There are a few. One, I think Jadis has floated a separate division called Nutriva. Emcure called Youth, Youth Nutraceuticals or something. But I think very few, pharma companies ventured into a dedicated division for nutraceuticals. I don't know. The reasons could be many, because the pharma companies had a lot of option for launching products. So they always looked at nutraceutical products as a portfolio, fillers. Like, they are in a particular segment, so they take a fits into that portfolio. So they felt the need for launching a separate division. And of course, there are challenges of having a separate division and then promoting all nutraceutical products in all therapies. That again calls for a different kind of expertise.
Right. So I think somewhere where you're endorsing what you are saying is, it all depends on with what intent
Yes.
It comes into the thing. What somebody was saying, that from selling to building, right? So if I'm looking at a nutraceutical to plug that, say, delta crore of turnover, I'll just take it and sell it, right? That's where I'm putting to go behind it. Santosh, I just want to reach out for one thing over here, right? You had mentioned about the various stakeholders coming into, who are coming into play now in deciding nutraceuticals. Do you feel that pharma will be able to do justice in engaging with all those stakeholders, or do you feel that it's better left to the wellness companies?
So I think objectively, if you ask me, who is going to actually win this war in the space of creating a space for themselves in the nutraceutical, I think as much I would like to believe that pharma will be the one which will have a very high right to win this, provided they do the things what has been pointed out by almost all the speakers. I think we are at an inflection point and we need to be very careful. The market opportunity is opening up. COVID has kind of forced us to think about health more seriously as pre-COVID. Just to give an example, actually, Vikram, if you take out all the leading global OTC brands, and if you start decoding where has the heritage of those brands been, there are n number of examples where you will find it was rooted always in pharma. It was RX. Almost the top 25 global brands in the consumer health that you pick it up, multiple of them have heritage in the pharma. And now, and that's the global phenomena, right? Almost all the bigger brands had at some point of time, not almost, if not, there's a significant portion had their heritage in the pharma. If you come down to India landscape, what Vijay was rightly pointing, that as a company, we need to build brands. And when you build brand and when you sell brands, pharma probably, I think building brands is a kind of a longer lead time. You need to keep investing in a brand building, whereas selling brands, you have a lower lead time. And then the molecule goes off after probably a span of 4 years, and then you innovate on molecule. But on brand, I think it's just, you have to invest and at some point of time. If you see today's India market, as much as, for example, multivitamins, everyone would understand Rivatal with the kind of talk of the time if you talk to consumers, but there are multiple RX brands which are being, which are called what we say OTX opportunity.
Correct.
Multiple nutraceuticals which are being consumed, which were once referred by doctors, but has been now inculcated into the daily habits. So I'm saying there is a lot of potential which is already sitting there, and obviously these were the companies are thinking very seriously on them, that they will try to bring them. For example, Vijay Christopher mentioned about Econom, right? Probiotic is such a massive space in nutraceutical. In India, unfortunately, the entire probiotic market is still dominated by the doctor fraternity. But when it comes to create a probiotic market in India, obviously these are the brands which hold the foot, because they have gained the trust in the space for so long. They have been building the brand. Hence my entire theory of right to win is actually because these were the players who are doing it. Bringing different stakeholders. I think one thing that is the most pivotal role here is what Samir pointed out, that yes, we have a right to win, but what it takes to win is not what we have versus it has to be. We have got a good product, but you have to think what a consumer wants, right? Ultimately, he wants a healthy lifestyle. He doesn't want to go into tons load of clinical data at the end of the day. He just needs to be told, assured, and he should have the trust in the story that this product is good for me. And who will he trust is obviously for the people who have a right to tell that this product is good for you. And that's where pharma comes in. Although it's not that the pharma companies will only be able to have a position to say, but I'm just saying that if they have a right to win it, if they get it right, they will get it right.